This is my second interview with Cara Judea Alhadeff. In this interview, we talk about mature themes related to human sexuality, the human body, and consciousness. So please enjoy the interview with Cara Judea Alhadeff.
Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Emmett Muckles, and today, once again, I have my favorite friend on the podcast, which is Cara Judea Alhadeff.
There you go. That's it. Yeah.
So,
Yes.
What most people don't realize is how we connected with each other. I was going through some looking to learn yoga, and I was looking at various videos, and I saw this video of a yoga class that was on Vimeo, and you were one of the participants on the video teaching class. And I was like, okay, cool. The only thing about it, it's a nude class.
Right. Real naked. Yes.
Yeah, it's naked yoga school. And I was just watching the videos, and and one of the things for me was because I could see how your muscles and your body responded to the various poses, because I was struggling. I was seriously struggling with the yoga. And it was like...
But that position helped you?
Yeah, so watching these various...
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Really helped me out to understand what was going on, not only in my own body, but from someone who is a teacher, how it affected them as well.
Yes, yes.
And with that, ooh, that's a little loud. And with that, what it allowed me to do was to better position because I'm stiff.
Right.
I'm like a tree trying to get somebody.
Well, sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
Doesn't help. Yeah.
And I noticed you, and there were many, there's 400 videos, but you stood out. For one thing, you not only there were two versions of you. There were the prenatal and the natal.
And the pre-prenatal.
And the pre-prenatal.
Right, before I was pregnant.
Yeah, so how did you come to that?
How did I come to that? Let's see. Well, nudity itself, public nudity, has been integral to my personal life and my professional life for many, many years in terms of the arts in particular, professionally in terms of the arts. My self-portraiture as a photographer, which I started really heavily getting into in my early 20s. And I can talk more about that. But with the nude yoga, that became clear to me. Let's see. Did you see me with hair on my head or without hair on my head?
I saw you with hair on your head. With
hair on my head. Okay. Because doing yoga without hair on my head, you don't have hair on your head. It's a phenomenally different experience without the constraints of external influence, whether it's hair or clothes. So I love to practice naked, and I was living in New York at the time. And I don't remember. Let's see. It may have actually been through the art scene in Manhattan, Brooklyn, maybe, because I was teaching Iyengar yoga at the time in just regular studios and private sessions. And I met a filmmaker who was excited about sharing this internationally, and that's how the relationship it was a collaboration. Between myself and this filmmaker who was visiting from Japan actually at the time.
You seem very ingrained in it, like you were one of the foundations of it. For some strange reason, it just seems like this was you. And the other thing that really stood out, because like I said, there's over 400 demonstration videos of, to show people but you as an individual stood out like this was you, like this was a part of you. And the other thing that came across that, and I don't know how I interpreted this, but I was like, this is the freest person I've ever seen. Because for one, when most people are nude, they're very skittish.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't like you were like flamboyant. It's just like you were literally comfortable in your own skin versus having an exo layer of clothing on.
Yeah. Well, that's been a big focus for me since I can remember, just really from in my own body, and then wanting to encourage other people to see their bodies as sacred, both reveling in our sexual potential, but also seeing our sensuality as something as a part of a sacred relationship to ourselves, to one another, to the world around us. And that's manifested in different ways, whether it's art or photography, or even how I choose to eat, how I choose to just live my life, how I choose to mother my 7-year-old son, in terms of sex positive parenting. And, for example, he was naked. I had a lot of problems with his nudity.
With whose nudity?
My son, even as a 2-year-old, getting in California, in the Bay Area, you'd think that people would be more open there, but I would, with park rangers, if we were in a playground or on a lake, at the Lake Temescal in Oakland, California, I never got cited, but I got a lot of warnings that it was indecent exposure of my baby, my little boy. So all of these paths came together, or just keep on coming together, because that was obviously after I gave birth. And those experiences were after my experiences as a photographer. How
old was he at the time that you had these experiences with him?
That was 0 through maybe the last, 5 years old.
That's bizarre because,
it's insane. Yeah.
Because I have family members and there's a baby running around. They take their diaper off and they go out in the backyard.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but what we're doing, of course, with diapers and shaming about body fluids, and, we're teaching that the inside and the outside both need to be concealed, and when we say, don't talk body talk, and, there's the shame about tears, about sweat, about emotions and what comes out of us, physical matter.
Yeah. But, that's an American thing.
Right.
Because as you go across the globe, you find that it's really not a thing. It's honestly not. And one of the big eye openers for me was when I watched a documentary about, I think it was a pygmy tribe in Africa.
Uh-huh.
And it was only in that moment that I start realizing that these people probably are natively nude, but usually if there's a camera, particularly in the United States, to come in, they give them loincloths.
Right. It's this whole sanitizing of the exotic other. Yeah. It's another form of colonialism.
Yes.
Because try and fit them into.
I was like, whoa.
What we're comfortable with.
Yeah. And, and I realized that there are a lot of, or very many, tribes of people who are barely clothed throughout their total existence.
They're right. Day one to day end. Yeah.
And one of the big things for me was the fact that finding out that I was vitamin D deficient. And,
oh, wow. Yeah.
And a Caucasian lady doctor laid it out. She's like, you're extremely low in vitamin D.
Wow.
And so she put me on like 10,000 IUs a day.
Wow.
Now I'm up to 15.
Lucky you found out. Yeah,
because it's winter time. And it elevates your mood. It helps me all that. But as I did the research, they said the reason for that is because we generally come from equatorial regions or regions where there's far more sun. And particularly if you're melanated, your
skin exposure.
Your skin converts that to vitamin D, the sunshine to vitamin D. We're kind of like plants.
Right.
And
we need it.
Yeah, we think, oh, well, I don't have a hat on and I don't have gloves on. That's not enough, but because it's a total body exposure that your skin converts that to. And so that got me to understand, to really change in the way I think about the human body. And then when I saw you, I was like, wow. I was like, this person is just free. So have you been that way your entire life?
I think so. I don't remember. Well, actually, I do. I don't have a lot of memories from my childhood, but I do remember that I started masturbating when I was around 5. I called it my private thing, even though it was public in my family. I remember I would, be in the back of the car as we were driving on a road trip or something, and I would be under a blanket and I would tell my parents, okay, I'm going to do my private thing. And they were very, my mom's an artist, a visual artist. My dad's an art historian. So the human body is definitely just, it's what we are.
Right.
So there's no shame ever about that or about exploring my feelings of sexuality with myself as a really young girl. And as I think really art had just a huge acclimation process to my own sense of wholeness around seeing the body as just that's it. It's strange to me when people are uncomfortable skinny dipping or uncomfortable when they have the opportunity to be not constrained by clothes. I mean, I get the social implications of it, of exposing ourselves, or public nudity. But I still think, this is such a great opportunity.
But, a lot of that comes from, how do I want to put this? It comes from the constructs, and the religions. For instance, in Islam, the reason why women cover their hair because it will make men lust. And it all came down to lust. Even some of the laws that we have nowadays that don't really pertain to sexuality all come down to preventing lust in men.
Which is absurd when we look at advertising.
Yes.
It's just, we live in such a hypersexual and totally sex-phobic culture at the same time. So I think that's why most of us, have schizophrenic relationships with our bodies, right? Because it's both, we're at this, in the US, we're at these extremes. Let's hate ourselves, but at the same time, everything is hypersexualized.
Yes, it is. And it's really bizarre because, I've said this many times on the podcast because it was brought to me by my wife. She was like, it wouldn't be such a thing if we didn't begin sexualization when we were very young because children never see their parents, either mom or dad, nude.
Right.
Girls never see their dad. Boys never see their dad or mom.
It's a mystery. Exactly.
It's a mystery. So then I surmise this because I'm old enough now where I can have a really even keel. The testosterone has dropped just a hair. And a lot of the sexualization comes because you don't see it and you begin to imagine it, what that person that you're kind of attracted to, what it's like for them. So it becomes a driving force. And my whole thing is, if more people were nude, there would be less stigma across. Oh yeah,
there'd be less rape. There would be less sexual violence in general, and I mean, I think that's one reason why art is so important in our lives. Art that is incorporating the human body because it normalizes us. It doesn't. There's not this weird mystique and. Of course, there's a mystery that is beautiful in all of our bodies.
Right.
But to keep it in this taboo, it's always in this frame of taboo. And if you touch it, you're danger. There's something. It's the danger factor.
I think a lot of it comes into possession too, because if you ask why most Catholic priests can't get married, you said, "Oh, it's chastity for." God. But we really know that and I don't mean to offend people, this is just the research that I've done. It really came down to property rights, because if a priest has a wife and children, then they have rights to whatever monetary or claim to whatever that profession that the male is doing, and the church didn't want to give it up.
Right. That's fascinating. When you think of what is appropriate, socially appropriate, the whole idea of appropriate is connected to property.
Right.
If you look at the etymology and historical uses of the idea of what is socially appropriate, it's very much connected to property and to ownership. And what is inappropriate often then is something that we can't own. You know, it's something that it's shapeless and it slips through our fingers, you know. So, I like that connection.
You've worked with very many women. I mean, a great deal of women.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen both sides of the coin, where women really are comfortable with themselves and their body, but the outside world isn't. And then you find those who are just like, no, I'm going to keep this wrapped up. When I go home, if I'm with my partner, it's in the dark. Right.
Yeah. You reminded me, I did a series of naked pregnant women in San Francisco in 2004, a photographic series, about between 15 and 20 women in each photo shoot in public venues. So in bars, in zoos, or the San Francisco Zoo, the Oakland Zoo, in music stores, bookstores. And one of the women, I remember so the women were naked and they were choreographed in various positions. And one woman had to have fabric over her face because her husband didn't want her identity to be seen in these photographs. So she wanted a sense of freedom. And as we went on with the photo shoot, she said, you know what, I'm just going to not cover my face because here I am with all these other pregnant women. It was beautiful watching them be in a non-medical situation. Cause we're often, we're naked only in front of a doctor.
Right.
You know, or maybe with our partner, but sometimes even there's shame, as you're saying. And for these pregnant women to be together in public and totally naked and totally in normal situations, you know, without being probed, without having things attached to them or being told that their bodies weren't adequate to birth their baby properly or, you know, like that kind of thing. So it's been a really fascinating process watching women who, of course, aren't pregnant, but also women who are going through stereotypical female experiences and their naked process.
So with that, meeting various women and recruiting women for your projects, do you find that women really aren't in tune with their own body?
I think most women are. But they need to be reminded. We all need to be reminded of what we already know. And that's an extremely challenging process. It reminds me of one of the questions that came up before in our previous discussion, about how do we remember? And for me, it really has to do with community in so many ways. It has to do with community. And that was one of my responses to you about how do I survive in this world?
Right.
And I think, the idea of women being with other men, women, transgender people, again, in totally normalized situations, naked or physically, you know, different than they usually are in the everyday world, really allows for them to remember. For example, one woman, I was living at a eco village called Lost Valley in Oregon. And I was doing a series of photo shoots with the men and the women living there. And they were naked or using like the beekeepers' outfits, things like that. And one woman broke down in tears after one of the photo sessions. And she was weeping because she felt like she finally could trust her body again. Because she felt like for so many years she had been, because she was very small breasted. And she felt like she had been desexualized and defeminized because we're a breast obsessed culture.
Yes.
And she felt like, wow, I felt woman, she didn't feel like she was a sexualized object as something disempowering, but as a fullness of her sexuality, as a sacred kind of collective reminder, this kind of animal-like and self-confidence. And she wept with relief. And that was a really beautiful process. And I've seen that also with women who have had miscarriages, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where they had to relearn that trust. And so it's a remembering process. And as you know, I write a lot about female ejaculation. And for me, ejaculation it's a remembering process. It's like this process of decontainment. A lot of how we're taught about sex is that you need to follow norms in order to be sexy and in order to attract your partner. And there's something about women ejaculating, or people who aren't socially expected to release, to physically release in a really visceral, obvious way, in a really tangible way. There's something that is it's a remembering that we're animals, and we're our vitality. It's like it's a life reminder.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've had a friend or two talk to me, and they were like, "Yeah, I was with this person, and it got really heavy, and I flowed." And the men just got upset, or were just taken aback, or were like, why didn't you warn me? How could you do that to me? Which to me says that these men just don't understand all that is encompassed in the female system, and only see things one way, which is kind of selfish, or it could be just that. It could be like this masculine selfishness that they are putting forth, how could you do that to me? When it's really, you did something really good, sir.
Right. You should be enjoying this moment of connection. Yeah. Or you could be enjoying. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of men are surprised.
So I want to ask you I want to jump back a little bit. So those videos that you did, is that something that consistently sustains you, throughout? Because they're constantly, those videos are still there. So do you get royalties from those? I've never even seen the
site. I'm not even sure, how they're presented. So that's interesting. Yeah, because it's a while ago already. I haven't done it since I've left California. My son was born almost 8 years ago, and I stopped doing the naked yoga videos after that. I was focusing more on breastfeeding politics and getting my dissertation and writing my first book.
Right.
So it's something that I haven't returned to, but I would like to even maybe, it's complicated with children, obviously. I was going to say even maybe with him.
Yeah, it does.
It just gets in, we live in such again, sex-phobic culture, and parenting. I exhibited with Sally Mann and a number of other phenomenal photographers who were censored because they were photographing their naked children. And
yes, that is a huge taboo in this country.
In the U.S., right.
It is a huge taboo. I actually remember we were at the beach, and my daughter was just constrained by her top. She's like 6.
Yes.
And she was like, she took it off. Ran in the water.
Oh my God, breathe. Yeah.
And we weren't even paying attention. We were just like making sure we had the lunches together and stuff like that.
You're not losing things.
And somebody's like, how can you let your daughter? I'm like,
exactly.
I'm like, you can't even tell it's a little girl.
Right. Yeah, exactly. She's
she had her bottoms on, but you really couldn't tell if, with her hair wet and stuff, you couldn't tell if it was a little girl. We put her top back on for the sake, because we're in a very conservative area. And I was like, sweetie, you just have to wear this. She was just incensed. Yeah. Why in the world? She's like,
you don't have to, Daddy. Why do I have to?
Exactly. That was her point. She was like, well, you don't. So I had to put my shirt on.
Right.
You're
both uncomfortable.
Yeah, just to make sure. So I'm sitting there in the water in a t-shirt and my swim trunks, and she's like,
right.
She's like,
no, it's absurd, right? We live in, and the problem is that we're just perpetuating more and more the body shame, and then creating situations where people act out obviously extremely problematic behavior because they have no place to express their feelings about their bodies.
So have you had any off-putting circumstances with men, because you are very much a very free person? You're very open. Like, for me, it seems like what I see is pretty much what I get.
Right. Not hiding anything.
Does that cause any relationship problems outside of, your core community? So if you meet someone new, or if you have met someone new, did you sense some kind of judgment because of that?
Well, when I was applying for university positions, teaching positions, I was concerned that people could easily find. I've never looked up my naked yoga background, so I don't know how easy or difficult it is to find people from. I get mostly international. I get people contacting me about the naked yoga and questions about it, and people who are really interested in exploring it themselves. So I don't know how much investigation it takes if someone's looking into my background, but that was a concern I had with jobs. But then I was also applying for jobs that have to do with gender, and everything I would teach, whether it have to do with ethnic studies or with climate justice, I would be folding in sexuality. Yeah. So if someone isn't going to hire me because they see my public nudity background and my sex education background, I'm not going to get the job, but I shouldn't be teaching there anyway because I would lose my job. So that's been the biggest issue. I tend to gravitate towards people who are not going to stamp out that life.
Right. Yeah, you can obviously see judgment a mile away, or this kind of people looking down their nose, which is, I find pretty bizarre because, in 2018, and I hate dating a podcast, but in 2018, our technology has come so far, but our psychological, emotional, and spiritual has not kept up pace with the technology that we have amassed. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, we've regressed a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. We're archaic. Yeah.
Yeah. Our communications are suffering. Our relationships are suffering. And people have almost too many choices in all areas of life. Right. Be that if you're buying ketchup.
Right.
Or you're looking.
Or just touching your partner.
Yeah. There's just so many choices for people. And I believe that's part of the relationship thing, is that there's too many choices, because we used to live in very small communities. And I'm talking about as recently as like the 60s and 70s. You didn't venture too far out of where you were from.
Yeah.
And now you get out and you're like, wow, look at all the options.
Right. And overwhelm and then paralysis. And yes.
So with your philosophy on life, you have a very free philosophy. And how do you plan to carry that forward in the future with body image and sexuality and sensuality?
Well, right now I'm focusing a lot with parenting and politics around what it means to be a parent who is not participating in a consumer fixated, just do it because we're just trying to get through the day, because we're exhausted, because we are depleted from all of these choices and our modern lifestyle. But how do we stay present with our children and allow both ourselves to still be alive in the face of endless demands, like one phrase I use is petroleum parenting.
Petroleum parenting?
Petroleum parenting, yeah. So parents who, consciously or unconsciously are through technology and education, consumerism, how we raise our children, how we go through medical relationships with doctors, pediatricians, and our kids. I mean, there's so many layers to it. But it goes back again and again to this petroleum addicted, pharmaceutical addicted culture. So a lot of what my work is about is how to bring light, because I think a lot of people, aren't even aware of how we're participating in a world, that I think is fairly fascist in terms of it's controlled, and we're participating in that control through our self denial and not trusting our bodies. From the moment we're told by an expert that we're pregnant, and then going through all the prenatal requirements. I was 40 when I both was pregnant and gave birth, and I gave birth on my 40th birthday to Zazu, and I did it at home as an unassisted home birth. And I was teaching prenatal yoga, and I was always encouraging my students, a lot of them in their 20s, that they don't have to do ultrasounds, that, they don't have to do the procedures that we just take for granted.
Right.
So my work now is very much about how do we even know what's taken for granted, because it's so ingrained in our daily behavior. And so much of it is life depleting. And how do we first become aware of all of these kind of invisible tyrannies around us, which includes around race, gender, around how we consume, all of these invisible, just again, givens, and step out of them, and then know that we can make other choices. So right now, today is a big day because we finished the tiny home conversion of our school bus. And so we're moving to this little community in North Carolina. And my focus there is really going to be more, I'm going more internally. So a lot of my work, or most of my work, has been about this crossover between the public and the private.
Right.
And how to create spaces publicly for people, for other people, for men and women, and for transgender people to find a sense of safety in their own bodies. And now I think it's time to really just focus more internally, and what does it mean in terms of my son with education, with the people in this community, this small community. It's only about 100 people.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm excited.
And it's warmer than where you are now.
Right. I'm wearing about 6 layers at the moment. Speaking about nudity, it's hard to be nude when you're...
Yeah, in the cold, it doesn't work out too well because it just becomes for a level of protection. But there are some instances where, let me put it to you this way. So I have this app on my phone because I have little children. Since about 2000, I've had this app on my phone, and it's the sex offenders. And you can go on, and it kind of lists where everyone is, so I can know who's around, because, my kids walk to school and this, that, and other, and this is part of the fear thing that embeds into Americans. And I started reading some of these cases, and literally a couple of people got on the sex offenders list because they were urinating in public.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing how we determine what is offensive. I was teaching naked yoga. I was pregnant. I was on the roof of our apartment in Oakland, and the police came and to stop me. There was a woman filming it, and there was a skyscraper nearby, and people from their office could see me. And I said, well, what constitutes, an offense like this? And they said it's subjective. They said if someone feels uncomfortable because you're choosing to be naked in public, public, I was on my roof, then they have a right to legally prevent me. But at the same time, I can, like when I was living in Manhattan, I would walk up this subway staircase and the Walgreens advertisement was of this woman jogging through the street and her shorts were so short you could see her butt cheeks hanging out. And that's, I don't know, a wall size advertisement for probably antidepressants or something like that, in the middle of Manhattan.
Yeah, but
the irony is ridiculous.
Speaking of which, if you go on if you go on Instagram, because my wife is a visual technology freak. She loves Pinterest, she loves Instagram, and she's a doula.
And she's doula, right? I forgot that, yeah.
So she's always showing me these birthing pictures, so I'm like, I'm good. I don't want to see that one. That one's a bit much.
Oh.
But
you know what I would say to that, right?
Pardon me?
I said, you know what I would say to that?
What?
That it's too much.
It was just,
I said never too much, right?
I mean, I've seen some things I was like, whoa. I was like, and you guys pop back to normal. That's amazing. But there's also some people who are naturists who are on Instagram as well. And the stipulation is they put these little stars either over their areolas or they put a little obstruction near their genitalia, and it's fine.
Ridiculous.
So you pretty much see 99% of their body except for these that, makes it non-offensive, which is so bizarre because I think about it. I'm not young, but the most prevalent that I would have seen when I was up to about 30 years old was probably the Sears catalog or Playboy.
Yes. Yeah.
But now my kid, my 12-year-old son, can literally type in breast and be barraged with images. He can just type in nude and it goes crazy.
Yeah. So how do you talk to him about that? I mean, do you have an open conversation about what the different implications are?
So I'll give you this thing.
Bombardment.
So my daughter, I have 4 daughters. No, I have 3 daughters. I have one that's like 35, one that's 27, and now a 9-year-old. So my wife and I, this is my second marriage. My wife was sitting on the couch and so my daughter was asking her, why do you have sex? And they were talking about children. She's like, why do you have sex if you don't want to have children anymore?
Oh, yeah.
And
right, unlike animals.
My wife just kind of got flabbergasted. She went through a few things, and I was walking through the room. She was like, Emmett,
help me answer this question, yeah.
So I said it like this. Yeah, she was like, why do you keep having sex if you're not trying to have any children? I said, Took me a minute. And I said, have you ever sat down to eat ice cream?
I know, I was just going to make an eating metaphor too. Yeah.
And she said, yeah. I'm like, and you're full?
That's why, yeah.
And she's like, yeah. I'm like, but you want to finish it and you keep eating? I'm like, why do you do that? She's like, because it feels good. It tastes great.
So
I'm
yummy.
like, it's the same way. And she had an aha moment. She went, oh.
That's so cute.
Get it now.
I like that, yeah.
And so, like, because before that, she was having these episodes, when you're a child and you think about, if you haven't been ingrained with the human body and how relationships work,
right.
You can be it can be offensive to you. Like the thought of your parents doing something is offensive to a child.
Well, and we're taught that it's yucky.
Yeah. And so after that moment, she was like, oh, okay. And like, she was having a bunch of issues and like understanding relationships and stuff. It all went away.
Wow. Yeah. I think food's a great teaching tactic.
Especially if you look at television, if you look at the world around you, it says 2 diametrically opposed things. It says, A, sex is bad. Here's sex.
Right.
And it's bad. It's bad. It's bad. Here it's more. Here's some more of it. Here's some more of it. We're going to overexpose you to it to the point where you don't know what to feel. And all of our doctrine, particularly in this country, says like seeing the natural form of the human body is bad. Right.
And have to hide everything that comes into and wants to go.
Yeah, and a lot of it is we come back to that thing of you try to control that thing that you fear the most. And women have a lot of power in this world. Because my wife always says, you're a knees. I told her this. I was like, I'm a knees to navel person. She's like, what do you mean knees to navel? I'm like, that's my favorite part. A knees to navel and the head.
Oh, yes.
And she was like, why is that? I'm like, because that's where all the magic happens. I'm like, so from knees to navel, that's where life is created.
Yes.
And then I'm like, I'm marveled at you guys. She was like, why? It's like, so you can create a life. Right. You can feed and sustain, and you can teach a life. Men don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a tremendous respect that needs to be developed and language around that respect. And we don't have that. So back to your question about what am I doing now in relation to these issues? A lot of it has to do with that. How do we teach that language, to young boys and to young girls and people who identify in between or other?
Yeah.
How do we really take that on as a social justice issue? Because it's so fundamental.
Yeah. My wife always says this. I bring up my wife a lot because we spend a lot of time together. We laugh a lot and we converse a lot and we discuss things. Wonderful. But we were in this place called Boys Town, which is the predominantly gay, trans area in Chicago. And we were just walking down the street. We were going to a bar because my friend lived in the neighborhood and we were staying at her place. And there's this guy leaning up against a pole. And she says to him, and he had this hat that lit up, and she goes, nice hat. And he looks over and goes, ooh, nice man.
Uh-huh.
And I tell this story, and people are like, you should have knocked him out. I'm like, why? I got a compliment.
He was appreciating.
I was like, I'm hot.
We are aesthetic objects, definitely. Yeah.
I was like,
that's part of it. How can we be, how can we revel in our beauty, in our sexuality, and have it not be about power over somebody? How can that be a shared experience of again, what it means to be fully alive, both as someone who's appreciating, the form of the body, or there's something intuitive and animalistic that's triggered when we see something that we like.
Right.
And that's legitimate. We need, rather than thinking that needs to be, and also violently shut down. I mean, that's one of the, I think, fundamental reasons why.
But
there's so many problems.
To me, it all comes down to you can have as many thoughts as you want.
Mm-hmm.
And someone said this to me a long time ago. The guy was smoking a cigarette. It was my boss, and I walked outside, and he had this look of consternation on his face, and he was like, Emmett, you never know what's in someone else's head. And that really
that doesn't bode well.
No, but that really stuck. He was having some issues in his life with his relationship, but that really stuck with me, that you really don't know what's in someone else's head, and it doesn't really matter what's in their head. It's the actions that they take, which are how you measure someone or how you can put someone in a box. So someone can be not quite right, but as long as they or offensive to you, but as long as they don't act upon their thoughts, we can all survive a lot better.
Right. Except ideas, thoughts, I think, are in a way a form of action. I mean, I do believe that thoughts do create energy in the world. They do create possible future action.
Yeah, because thoughts become things.
Yeah. I mean, and they're energy flow. I mean, they change our physiology, right? We know that the relationship.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this:
body.
What if you could get up on a big pedestal, right?
Oh yeah, place to be. No,
you could get up on a big pedestal and everybody in the United States could see you. You had a big megaphone that could just 360 degree across the country. And you had a speech that you knew that you could say, I can influence these people. What would you say to them?
Well, my first thought as you're asking that is to trust ourselves, to really drop in and remember something fundamental in each of ourselves. That process of, I think a lot of our lives, especially as women, we undermine what we know, and we do a lot of self-sabotaging, whether it's around our sexuality or issues of feeling empowered, in professional situations, in educational situations. So to drop in, to come back to something so simple, like the flesh, like our own bodies, incredibly layered and complex, but incredibly simple and straightforward at the same time. And to remember that and to trust that.
Awesome. How can people support you?
How can people support? Let's see. My photographs are on one of my sites, carajudea.com. And they're all analog images that I printed. So check out my work, see if people are interested in the photographic images. I have 2 books that I've written. One that has about 95 of my photographs in it. It's a philosophy book that's looking at the vulnerability of the body as a strategy for social justice. So looking at the relationship, the sexuality, the arts, and seeing a lot of what we're talking about. How can we see vulnerability as a powerful, both individual and collective territory for making change in the world and really being fully alive. So if people are interested in purchasing that book, Viscous Expectations, that's on my website. And my second book is about climate justice and also very much about vulnerability and what it means to connect across borders, across socially constructed boundaries. And that's Zazu Dreams. And that website is zazudreams.com.
Awesome.
So those are 2 ways.
Awesome.
And I love to collaborate with different artists, people from different fields. So if someone hears this and they're interested in collaborating, they can let me know.
So are you going to kind of distance yourself from like this mainstream consumerist society that we have, or what are your plans for, let's say, the next 3 years?
I'd say, yeah, it's a little bit of a moving into a distance. Definitely, I'm gonna totally off the grid. We're not gonna have any electricity in our bus. We're calling it the Love Bus, and a time to really go inside and figure out how to in a way not be at war with the world around me that is making such different choices different from what I find, ethically palatable. I'll put it that way.
Is that what you felt? Did you feel like you were in a battle with the world at large, to a sense?
In a sense, definitely. I mean, even though as I said, I tend to surround myself with people who have similar values and who make similar choices around their bodies and their children's bodies and how they relate to their friends and family. I left that world as an artist many years ago when I was living in San Francisco. I lived there for about 20 years as a photographer and an Iyengar yoga teacher. So since then, I guess I've been free floating a little bit, untethered. And I'm hoping this time will be less about maybe reaction to the world and more about a rebuilding process. So taking my own advice, basically, I'm gonna reread my own books.
I want to ask you this though, because this is pressing on me. How can someone who is financially ingrained in the world detach in that method? Because, you know, that's got to be a question. Like, how is she able to do this? Because actually, you know, America's about, they say it's about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but the original doctrine is life, liberty, and the pursuit of land. And it was changed.
Wow, I did not know that.
So how is it that you...
I just got a surge of nausea there.
I mean, you have to think about it. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of land, because when the area was being conquered, remember, they were just giving away areas of land that weren't really owned, but they said, if you go claim this property, it's yours. Even though there might have been indigenous people there.
Absolutely.
And it just spread out through the entire territory.
Yeah.
How can you sustain yourself like that?
Well, I live in a barter economy, and I certainly don't expect other people necessarily to make these kinds of radical economic choices that I've made in my life over the past, 20, 25, almost 30 years. But for people, again, what I was talking about before about shining a light on what we take for granted, if people begin to realize that there are alternatives to just the new, getting new. Even like with this bus, it's all repurposed materials. It's all salvaged materials. And they're not of any less value because they've been used. They're not going to landfill, which to me gives them a tremendous amount more value. So repositioning, helping people maybe take a step back and reposition their relationship to the objects around them. There's a beautiful children's book by Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi, who's one of the people who endorsed my second book, along with Noam Chomsky and Bill McKibben, Shakji, Vensler, a bunch of...
Did you say Shakji?
Yeah.
Humpty Hump, Shakji?
Humpty Hump, yeah. He's my son's uncle.
Oh my God, I'd love to meet Shakji.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He's really... I don't know, on my website you can see his endorsement of Sazi Dreams, but he's right there, and it's obviously very playful. I mean, we know how playful he is.
Yeah, he's a second generation funkster.
Oh yeah, no, he's right. Yeah, he's beautiful, and for Zazu to have him as a role model, a direct role model, since he's his uncle, has been really a gift for me. And I want them to collaborate. And I hope that they do a collaboration around the body, actually, and around Black men's bodies and also biracial men's bodies. So what it means to be in this in-between, and also so marginalized. So I'm hoping, Greg and I have spoken a little bit about this in different situations. But, so Arun Gandhi, who's Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, wrote a book about waste and not wasting in terms of nonviolence. And so if we can see the objects around us as sacred, I think that would give people a different sense maybe of what it means to just take on more objects and dispose of more objects.
I've done it over the weekend. I literally had a fire sale. So here's what I did. I do this periodically, like once every 6 months or a year. At the long end, maybe like 2 years. I look at the things around me and say, all right, what's my relationship with X? Have I used it in 6 months? Have I used it in 3 months? Do I plan to really use it honestly to its capacity or 50% of its capacity in the next 6 months? Mm-hmm. And if it's my possession, if I say no to any one of those, it's out of here. It gets sold.
It gets sold, right? And then so hopefully then some people have a really positive relationship with it.
Yeah.
Someone else, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, swapping is to just put that out there around swapping, around shared economies. I haven't bought any new clothes or shoes, accessories, anything like that for about 30 years.
What?
And not even used. from thrift stores, because it's all through swaps. And also for Zazu, I haven't purchased a single thing for him, new or used, from when he was born up until this point, and he's almost 8. Cloth diapers, everything I found at swaps. And it's this idea of community, and it's a very different idea of hygiene too. Like, a lot of people think, oh, it's used, it's dirty. It's contaminated on some level because someone else, enjoyed it. And so they can't have as much pleasure from it. And if we can begin to let go of that idea of property that is so, like you said, the pursuit of land. I mean, I think that
blew your mind, didn't it?
Screwing us up. It's screwing up our sexuality. It's screwing up our parenting. It's obviously screwing up our politics. Mm-hmm. If we could have a different understanding of what it means to own, and instead own our bodies, own our emotions, take ownership of your aggression towards your partner or your child or yourself, take that ownership, let go of the ownership of your whatever.
Yeah. What about consumables? How do you manage consumables in your life when you're in the barter economy?
It's all swapped.
Really?
It's all swapped. Yeah. Everything is whenever I tend to move a lot, and I'm hoping that's going to change. Also because I'm looking for the right educational community and all of that. So there's been a lot of flux that way. But so I do move a lot, and because I am really out there, in terms of meeting new people, and wherever I go, that's what I do. So I end up generally hosting swaps. I meet people, and if I like what someone's wearing, or they look like they're funky people, then I'll invite them, and I'll build community that way. And it's intimacy when you're getting to know people through objects, that they will then enjoy, that you have a history with. I mean, we're a very object-oriented society, and a lot of the other societies are object-oriented too, but they're different, their jewelry or their symbols, their amulets, or beautiful fabrics. So there's something about beauty, like you said before, the guy who said nice, what do you say, nice man?
Yeah, nice man.
The guy, yeah.
To my wife.
Right, to your wife, yeah. I mean, I think it's all very connected.
That's so awesome. Have we covered everything?
Never.
I mean, have we covered the topics we were discussing? Have we gone in depth enough?
I think so. I think we're good.
Okay. So, you're always welcome to come talk to me on the show.
Fantastic.
And it is what it is.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. Today we talk, this was a conversation with Emmett. You heard a conversation between friends, male and female, about very open topics. And this is how we should be. There was no judgment, none at all. Just like going to Planet Fitness, no judgment zone. And that's one of the things that I live to convey, because as a man of color, every day I feel judgment. And this is why I say to you to be with yourself, to take some time and just look in the mirror, even if you haven't just gotten out the shower, just get up, go to the mirror, and just sit there and look at your face. Look at your hairline, see all the moles, see the things that have changed. Be with yourself. And because you are such a special creature and it took a lot of things to make you, you deserve that. And if you have a partner, ask them to come join the mirror next to you. And then as you both are exploring yourself, turn and face each other. Don't say anything. Just look at each other. Start with 30 seconds. See if you can make it that long by just staring in someone's face. Then go to a minute, and then ultimately go to 2 minutes. And then just stop. And then just remember what you saw. because you saw the galaxies that are in their face, the nebulae that are in their face, which are the representation of eyes, which lets light in, because we're human beings. So you're a person of the sun, no matter if you're pink or dark brown, you're in the image of man, and you're having an experience, which is the being part. You were given a life. That's it. What you do with it is up to you. Remember, there's love all around you, and you can always find it here. Till next time, peace.